In the peaceful African village of Lutho, a kind and intelligent girl named Azania lived happily with her loving parents. Their small home was always filled with warmth, laughter, and love. But one fateful day, tragedy struck. Azania's mother died under mysterious circumstances. No one in the village could explain what had happened, and whispers of bad luck spread through the community. But to Azania, none of that mattered. The only thing she knew was that her mother was gone forever, leaving a deep emptiness in her heart. Her father, Cabello, was devastated. He tried his best to raise Azania alone, but grief weighed heavily on him. He believed his daughter needed a mother's care, so after some time, he remarried a woman named Boule. He hoped she would bring happiness back into their home, but he had no idea of the darkness he was inviting into their lives. Boule arrived in their home with her daughter, Kanisa, a spoiled girl who had never known hardship. At first, Azania tried to be kind, hoping they could be a family, but she soon realized that Boule was not the loving stepmother Cabello believed her to be. In front of Cabello, Boule acted sweet, treating Azania like her own child. But the moment he left for work, her kindness vanished. She favored Kanisa, spoiling her with beautiful clothes, delicious food, and endless affection, while Azania was treated like a servant. Boule forced Azania to do all the house chores, making her clean, cook, and fetch water, while Kanisa played and enjoyed a life of comfort. Whenever Azania tried to complain, Boule's sharp eyes silenced her with a single glare. And Cabello, he remained blind to it all, fooled by Boule's false kindness. Azania could feel her world changing. The home that once brought her joy was now a place of suffering. She missed her mother more than ever, but there was no one to save her. What she didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would soon consume her entire life. Life in the village of Lutho had once been beautiful for Azania. She had grown up in a home filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of her mother's embrace. But ever since her mother's death and her father's remarriage, everything had changed. The home that once felt safe now felt like a prison, and the woman who was supposed to be her new mother had turned it into a place of suffering. From the moment Boule entered their lives, she made it clear that Azania was unwanted. At first, it was little things, small insults, cold stares, and an obvious favoritism towards her own daughter, Kanisa. But as time passed, Boule's cruelty grew worse. She turned Azania into a servant in her own home. While Kanisa lived like a princess, Azania was forced to do all the house chores. Every morning, before the sun even rose, Azania was woken up by Boule's sharp voice. "Get up, lazy girl. There is work to be done," she would snap, pulling the blankets off Azania's small, shivering body. While Kanisa lay comfortably in bed, Azania had to start her day by sweeping the house, fetching water from the river, and preparing breakfast, not for herself, but for Boule and Kanisa. She watched as they sat at the table, enjoying warm, delicious food, while she was given nothing but leftovers, if there were any. If she dared to ask for more, Boule's eyes would darken with anger. "Be grateful for what you get," she would hiss, making Azania's heart sink. After breakfast, while other children in the village went to school, Azania stayed behind, forced to continue working. She scrubbed floors until her hands ached, washed clothes until her fingers turned raw, and cooked meals she was barely allowed to taste. Meanwhile, Kanisa spent her days playing, laughing, and wearing beautiful dresses that Boule bought for her from the village market. Whenever Cabello was home, Boule pretended to be kind. She would smile sweetly and say, "Azania is such a helpful girl. She loves doing chores." And Cabello, unaware of the truth, would nod and praise his daughter for being responsible. Azania wanted to scream, to tell her father the truth, but the fear of Boule's punishments kept her silent. She knew what would happen if she spoke out, because when Cabello was away for work, Azania's life became a living nightmare. Boule's cruelty had no limits. If Azania made even the smallest mistake, if she spilled water, burned food, or forgot to do something, she was met with harsh punishments. Sometimes it was a slap across the face. Other times it was being locked outside in the cold for hours, forced to sleep on the hard ground like an animal. The worst days were when Boule was in a particularly bad mood. On those days, she would find any excuse to punish Azania. "You are useless, just like your mother," she would sneer, her words cutting deeper than any wound. "I don't even know why Cabello keeps you here." Azania would bite her lips to stop the tears from falling. Crying only made Boule angrier. She learned to hold the pain inside, to swallow her sadness like a bitter pill. But inside, her heart was breaking. She missed her mother. She missed the warmth of her father's love. She missed the days when she was treated like a child, not a slave. At night, after a long day of work and suffering, Azania would curl up on the small mat she called a bed. She could hear Kanyisa snoring peacefully in the soft, warm blankets that Bool had bought for her. Azania closed her eyes tightly, praying that one day things would change. That one day, she would be free from this misery. But deep down, a terrible fear whispered in her heart. What if things never changed? What if this was her life forever? With no one to protect her, no one to hear her cries, Azania felt completely alone. And as the darkness of the night surrounded her, she wondered if she would ever escape the cruelty that had become her world. Azania had always believed that no matter how bad things got, they couldn't get worse. But she was wrong. Bool's cruelty had no limits. And soon, she came up with a plan to destroy Azania completely. At first, Bool made sure that Azania was treated like a servant. She forced her to do all the house chores, while Kanyisa lived like a princess. But one day, Bool decided that even that wasn't enough. She wanted to break Azania's spirit, to take away everything that made her hopeful. And the first thing she took away was food. Azania's meals became smaller and smaller. At first, she was given plain porridge while Bool and Kanyisa ate rich, delicious meals. Then, even that stopped. Now, she was only given scraps. The bones left after Bool and Kanyisa had eaten all the meat, the dry pieces of bread no one else wanted. Some nights, she was given nothing at all. Her stomach growled in pain, but when she asked for more food, Bool only laughed. "You don't deserve to eat like us," she said, tossing a tiny piece of burnt food onto Azania's plate. "Be grateful you get anything at all." Meanwhile, Kanyisa ate like a queen. Every day she had warm, delicious meals, soft bread, sweet fruit, roasted meat, and fresh milk. She would smirk at Azania as she ate, enjoying the power she had over her. This is so good," she would say, licking her fingers while Azania sat nearby, her stomach aching from hunger. But Beulah wasn't finished. Taking away Azania's food wasn't enough. She wanted to take away her future too. One morning, as Azania was getting ready for school, Beulah stopped her at the door. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, crossing her arms. "To school, Mama," Azania said, her voice small. Beulah's eyes darkened. "You are not going to school anymore," she said. "School is for important people, not for useless girls like you." Azania's heart sank. "But I want to learn," she whispered. Beulah grabbed her by the arm, her fingers digging into Azania's skin. "You will stay home and work. That is all you are good for," she said coldly. Tears filled Azania's eyes, but she knew there was no point in arguing. If she fought back, Bool would punish her even worse. So she put her schoolbooks away and picked up the broom, her dreams of education slipping away like dust in the wind. But Beulah's wickedness didn't stop there. She wasn't satisfied with just starving Azania and taking away her education. She wanted to make sure that no one in the village would ever help her. She began spreading lies about Azania. Whenever she visited the market or spoke to the other women in the village, she would shake her head and sigh dramatically. "Azania is such a troublesome child," she would say. "She is rude and lazy. I try my best to raise her well, but she refuses to listen." People in the village, who had once loved Azania's mother, began to believe Beulah's lies. They started looking at Azania with pity, or worse, with suspicion. When she walked through the village, she could hear the whispers behind her back. "She is a bad child. Maybe she is cursed. Her poor stepmother. She must be so patient to deal with her." Azania wanted to scream, to tell them the truth, but who would believe her? Beulah was clever. She hid her cruelty well, and no one knew the suffering Azania went through behind closed doors. So, she kept her head down and stayed silent. She worked, she starved, she suffered, and every night, as she lay on her thin mat, her stomach empty, her heart heavy, and her dreams shattered, she wondered how much longer she could survive. Cabello's illness came suddenly, turning the once strong man into a shadow of himself. His body grew weak, his voice lost its firmness, and soon, he struggled to even sit up. The home that once echoed with his deep laughter now felt cold and quiet. Bool, instead of worrying for her husband, saw this as the perfect moment to seize complete control. She moved through the house like a queen, giving orders, pretending to care, but secretly twisting every moment to her advantage. Whenever villagers came to check on Cabello, She sighed dramatically, shaking her head. I do everything I can, but it is difficult, she would say, pretending to wipe away a tear. This home has been filled with bad luck for years. At night, she sat beside Cabello, whispering poison into his ears. Have you noticed how sickness never touched this house before? She murmured, her voice soft and dangerous. Ever since your first wife passed, nothing has been the same. You work harder, yet we have less. You love, yet you suffer. And now, you are lying here, unable to move. Don't you see, Cabello? There is something wrong in this house. A tired sigh escaped his lips. What are you saying? I am saying that there is one person in this house who brings misfortune, and if she stays, things will only get worse. His forehead creased in confusion. She is my child. Is she? Buell leaned in closer. The villagers whisper about her. They say she is cursed, that wherever she goes, trouble follows. I tried, Cabello. I tried to love her, to raise her as my own, but she resists. She disrespects me. She refuses to obey. If you keep her here, what will happen next? Will you even wake up tomorrow? A deep silence filled the room. Cabello stared at the ceiling, his heart heavy. His mind was clouded with weakness, his body too tired to argue. By morning, the decision was made. A summons came, the kind that carried weight in the air. Eyes heavy with exhaustion, he forced himself to sit up as the girl stood before him. For a long moment, he could not look at her directly. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke the words that could never be taken back. You must leave. Shock froze the room. What? Her voice was barely above a whisper. It is for the best, he muttered, not daring to meet her gaze. A step forward, hesitation in the air. Since when do you listen to her over your own blood? Buell stood in the background, silent but victorious. Cabello exhaled, his face lined with weakness and something else. Regret, perhaps. This home needs peace. You must go. Nothing else was said. No explanations, no justifications. Just an unspoken truth settling between them like a thick fog. Tears burned, but no plea left trembling lips. The realization was too heavy, too final. Feet moved toward the door, slow and measured, as if dragging the weight of betrayal itself. Outside, the evening sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the village of Lutho. The world felt colder than before, and somewhere behind closed doors, laughter echoed, a cruel, satisfied sound. The air was heavy with silence, as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the village of Lutho cloaked in darkness. The night felt different, colder, sharper, as if something terrible was about to happen. Inside the small house, Buell moved with quiet purpose, her eyes gleaming with a cruel determination. She had tolerated Azania for too long. It was time to get rid of her, for good. She called out in a voice too sweet to be real. Come, girl. We need firewood for the morning. The words were strange, firewood at night, but questioning Buell always led to pain, so there was no choice but to obey. Feet dragged forward, hesitant but compliant. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, swallowing all light except for the weak glow of the moon. The path twisted deeper into the forest, the tall trees standing like silent witnesses to whatever evil was unfolding. The deeper they went, the less familiar the surroundings became. Leaves rustled underfoot, and distant night creatures called out into the emptiness. Something was wrong. A clearing appeared up ahead, but there was no firewood, only an old, abandoned farm. Its broken fence leaned tiredly to one side, and beyond it, dark figures shifted in the shadows. A low, guttural growl filled the air. Buell's grip tightened. Go inside, she ordered, her voice no longer pretending to be kind. Hesitation froze the moment. Why are we here? The answer came without warning. Rough hands shoved forward, sending fragile feet stumbling past the broken fence. Before balance could be regained, the gate slammed shut with a final, unforgiving clank. Panic clawed at the chest. Let me out! Hands gripped the wooden bars, shaking them desperately. Buell only laughed, stepping back into the shadows. You are nothing but a burden. Let's see if you can survive the beasts. More growls echoed through the darkness. The figures in the shadows moved closer. Wild, hungry dogs, their eyes glowing with hunger, their ribs pressed against their thin skin, proof that they had not eaten in days. A single step backward, then another. The animals mirrored each movement, drawing in like a pack, sensing weakness. The largest among them bared its teeth, saliva dripping from its mouth as it prepared to lunge. A scream ripped through the night. The The night was silent, except for the sound of footsteps crunching against dry leaves. Bula walked ahead with quick, confident strides, dragging Azania along without a word. The girl's heart pounded. Something felt wrong. There was no firewood, no sign of anything useful, just an eerie silence, and the feeling that danger lurked nearby. A broken fence came into view, its wooden posts rotting with age. Beyond it, shadows moved. Low, rumbling growls filled the air. Azania's stomach twisted. She stopped walking. "Why are we here?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Before she could get an answer, strong hands shoved her forward. Her body stumbled over the uneven ground, and she fell to her knees inside the enclosure. Sharp pain shot through her hands as they scraped against the dirt. The moment she hit the ground, a loud clank echoed in the darkness. The gate had been locked. Azania's breath came fast and shaky. She scrambled to her feet and ran to the wooden bars, gripping them tightly. "Let me out!" she cried, shaking the gate desperately. Boole stood on the other side, her arms crossed, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "No one is coming for you," she said. "You are nothing. You have always been nothing." Tears burned in Azania's eyes, but before she could respond, movement in the shadows caught her attention. Glowing eyes stared at her from every direction. Wild, starving dogs. Thin, desperate, and dangerous. Their ribs pressed against their skin, their mouths dripping with saliva. One of them stepped forward, sniffing the air, its growl deep and menacing. Azania's entire body froze. The dogs circled her, watching, waiting. A sharp laugh rang out behind her. "This is where you belong," Boole mocked. "Maybe you'll be useful to someone after all. A meal for the beasts." Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Her laughter faded, swallowed by the darkness. Azania was alone. The largest dog bared its teeth, inching closer. She took a slow step back, but the animals followed. Every movement, every breath, made them more restless. She couldn't run. They would catch her in seconds. She couldn't fight. She was too small, too weak. Her mind raced. Panic would only make things worse. Animals could smell fear. If she showed weakness, they would attack. Swallowing her terror, she forced herself to stay still. Her hands shook, but she slowly lowered them to her sides. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to hurt you." A smaller dog whimpered, its ears twitching, but the leader of the pack remained tense, its growls growing louder. Azania's legs felt like they would give out. She was trapped, surrounded, helpless. Then, just as the largest dog prepared to lunge, a sound shattered the night, a rustling in the bushes. A voice, strong and familiar, called out, "Azania!" Hope surged through her chest. Someone had come, but would they reach her in time? The wild dogs inched closer, their growls deep and menacing, their glowing eyes locked onto Azania, their hungry bodies tense, ready to strike. She could feel the ground trembling beneath her feet as her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She wanted to scream, but fear gripped her throat like a tight rope. Then, as if from nowhere, a loud rustling broke through the tension. The bushes behind the enclosure shook violently, and a strong, commanding voice echoed through the night. "Get away from her!" A tall, powerful figure stepped out of the shadows, holding a thick wooden staff in her hands. It was Mama Themba, Azania's grandmother, her face fierce with determination. Without a moment of hesitation, she charged forward, swinging the staff with incredible strength. The largest dog lunged at Azania, but before its sharp teeth could reach her, crack! Mama Themba struck it hard across the side. The animal yelped and stumbled back. The rest of the pack hesitated, growling in confusion, but Mama Themba was fearless. She raised her staff again, her voice thundering through the night. "Go! Leave, you cursed beasts!" She stomped her foot, swinging the staff wildly, and the dogs finally gave in. One by one, they backed away, their hunger no longer worth the fight. With one final bark, they turned and disappeared into the darkness. Azania collapsed to the ground, her legs weak, her body trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she gasped for breath. Mama Themba rushed to her, pulling her close. "Oh, my child," she whispered, her voice filled with relief and sorrow. "I've been looking for you everywhere." Azania clung to her grandmother, sobbing into her warm embrace. "She left me here," she choked out. "She wanted me to die." Mama Themba's eyes darkened with fury. She had suspected Buli's cruelty, but this was pure evil. She held Azania tighter, rubbing her back gently. No one will ever hurt you again, my sweet child." Carefully, she helped Azania to her feet. The girl's body ached from exhaustion and fear, but she knew she was finally safe. With Mama Themba's strong arms wrapped around her, they made their way out of the cursed farm. The journey back to the village was slow. The forest stretched endlessly before them, the trees whispering in the wind. Mama Themba carried Azania when her legs grew too weak, humming a soft, comforting song. When they finally reached the old woman's small hut at the edge of the village, she wasted no time. She laid Azania down on a soft mat, bringing warm water and healing herbs. As she gently cleaned the girl's wounds, she spoke in a soothing voice. "You are stronger than you know, Azania. You have survived what no child should ever endure. But hear me now. Your suffering ends tonight." Azania watched her grandmother, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't name. For the first time in so long, she felt safe, loved. Mama Themba tucked a warm blanket around her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Rest, my child. Tomorrow we will show the world the truth." As Azania closed her eyes, exhaustion finally pulling her into sleep, one thought remained in her heart. She was no longer alone. In the weeks that followed the terrible events, whispers of Bool's misdeeds spread quickly throughout the village. Neighbors who had once admired her gentle smile began to exchange knowing glances and murmurs of disapproval. Soon, many realized that the kindness she showed to outsiders was nothing but a cover for her cruelty at home. People recalled the cold way she treated Azania, the deliberate neglect, and even the shocking tale of the night when Azania was left with the wild dogs. The truth was hard to ignore, and as word spread, the villagers grew angry and disillusioned with her. Cabello, who had been slowly recovering from his long illness, began to hear these stories. At first, he struggled to believe that the woman he had welcomed into his home could be capable of such heartless acts. Yet, as more villagers spoke up with details he had never known, a deep sense of regret took hold of him. He remembered the quiet moments when Azania's eyes would search for his understanding, the silent plea for protection that went unanswered. The realization that he had been blinded by false appearances and deceit tore at his heart. Every whispered account, every tearful confession from someone who had seen Azania's suffering, confirmed that he had made a terrible mistake. One bright morning, as Cabello worked in his small garden, trying to regain some sense of peace, he was approached by a group of villagers. They spoke gently at first, but soon their voices grew firm as they recounted the terrible treatment Azania had endured. Their words painted a picture of a household where cruelty reigned, a place where a young girl was starved, humiliated, and left alone in moments of desperation. Each word struck Cabello like a blow, and his heart filled with sorrow and guilt. He realized that the home he had tried so hard to protect had become a place of endless pain for his own daughter. Unable to bear the weight of his regret any longer, Cabello resolved to confront the one responsible for this misery. With his steps heavy and his heart pounding in sorrow, he entered the house to face Buell. Inside, the air felt thick with tension. Buell sat calmly as if nothing were wrong, her face betraying no hint of the treachery she had woven. Cabello's voice trembled as he demanded an explanation. He asked, with a mix of anger and despair, why his daughter had suffered so much under her care. Buell attempted to speak, her words coming out in a rush of weak justifications and false concerns. She tried to claim that everything was as it should be, that Azania's behavior was to blame, and that her strict methods were for the greater good. But even as she spoke, the truth began to unravel. In the middle of her defense, Kanyisa, who had long hidden her own feelings of guilt, could not hold her silence any longer. With tears welling in her eyes, she accidentally let slip the real story, the cruel punishments, the withheld food, and the cold indifference that had become their daily life. Her confession was like a spark igniting a long-doused flame. Cabello's face fell as he listened, the weight of every lie and every act of cruelty coming crashing down upon him. The villagers who had gathered quietly at the door listened in shock as Kanyisa's words confirmed what they had suspected all along. Bull's carefully constructed web of deceit unraveled before everyone's eyes. In that painful moment, the villagers' support for Bull vanished completely. They saw her not as a kind woman, but as a heartless oppressor who had exploited her power over the most vulnerable. Disgusted and betrayed, the villagers turned their backs on her, doors closed behind her, and she was left isolated, a pariah in the community she once manipulated. Cabello, filled with deep regret, vowed to make amends for the pain he had allowed to fester in his home. He knelt before Azania, apologizing with every word, desperate for forgiveness that he knew would be hard to earn. Though the scars of betrayal ran deep, this painful confrontation marked the beginning of a long road toward healing and redemption, for both him and the broken heart of his daughter. Buli stood in the center of the village, surrounded by angry faces. The same people who once greeted her with respect now looked at her with disgust. Mothers clutched their children close, whispering about the wickedness she had hidden for so long. Fathers shook their heads, unable to understand how someone could be so cruel to a child. The village elder, a wise man with years of experience in settling disputes, stepped forward. His voice was steady but firm. "You have committed great evil, Bul. You mistreated a child who had already lost her mother. You starved her, humiliated her, and even tried to end her life. This village will not shelter a heartless woman like you." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Bula's face remained emotionless, but her fingers trembled. For years she had controlled everything: her husband, her daughter, even the way the village saw her. But now, the truth had shattered her power, leaving her with nothing. She turned to Cabello, desperation creeping into her voice. "You can't let them do this to me. I was only trying to discipline her." But Cabello did not look at her the way he once did. His love had died the moment he learned the truth. His voice was heavy with disappointment. "Discipline?" He shook his head. "You call starving a child discipline? Throwing her to wild dogs? You are no wife of mine, and you are no mother." The words hit her harder than a slap. For the first time, she felt the weight of her actions crashing down on her. But there was still one person who might stand by her side. She turned to Kanisa, her only daughter, and reached out her hand. "Come, my child, we will leave this place together." Kanisa took a step back, her eyes filled with shame. She had always been the favorite, the one who never suffered, the one who always received more. But seeing the truth of her mother's actions had changed something in her. She could no longer ignore the cruelty. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "I can't go with you, Mama," she said in a broken voice. "I don't want to be like you." Bul's breath caught in her throat. The rejection stung worse than anything else. She had lost everything: her home, her husband, her reputation, and now, even her daughter. The village elder raised his hand, signaling the end of the judgment. "Bul, you are no longer welcome here. Leave now, and never return." With nothing left to say, Bul turned and walked away. She had no choice. The villagers did not watch her go. They simply turned their backs, as if she no longer existed. For the first time in years, peace settled over the village. The darkness that had hovered over Azania's life had finally lifted. No longer forced to live in fear, she was free. Mama Themba wrapped a protective arm around her granddaughter. "You are safe now, my child," she whispered. Azania looked around at the villagers, some smiling gently, others nodding in quiet approval. She had never felt like she belonged before, but today was different. People who had once ignored her suffering now saw her strength. Cabello, his eyes filled with regret, stepped forward. "Azania," he said softly, "I failed you as a father. I was blind when you needed me the most. Can you ever forgive me?" Azania searched his face, seeing the sorrow in his eyes. The pain of his betrayal still lingered, but for the first time, she saw a man who truly wanted to change. She didn't answer immediately, but she gave him a small nod. Forgiveness would take time, but at least now, she had the choice. The days that followed were filled with healing. Azania no longer woke up to hunger or cruel words. She no longer feared the nights. Mama Themba took care of her, feeding her, braiding her hair, and reminding her every day that she was loved. As time passed, Azania's confidence returned. She laughed more. She walked taller. The scars of her past would never fully disappear, but they no longer defined her. She was more than the pain she had suffered. She was strong, she was free, and she was ready for a new beginning. The dark cloud that had hung over Azania for years had finally disappeared. For the first time in a long while, she woke up without fear. The mornings were filled with warmth, the sound of birdsong, and the gentle voice of Mama Themba, reminding her that she was safe. One morning, Mama Themba placed a gentle hand on Azania's shoulder. "It is time for you to return to school, my child," she said with a kind smile. "You have lost so much, but your dreams are still waiting for you." Azania hesitated. School had once been her escape, a place where she felt like she belonged. But after years of being locked away, treated as nothing more than a servant, she wasn't sure if she could go back. What if she had fallen behind? What if she wasn't good enough? Mama Themba seemed to sense her worries. She cupped Azania's face and looked into her eyes. "You are stronger than you know. The world tried to break you, But you are still standing. You can do this. Taking a deep breath, Azania nodded. She would try. When she walked into the classroom, the other students stared. Some whispered, remembering the cruel lies Buell had spread about her. But as days passed, they saw the truth. Azania was not the troubled girl they had been told about. She was bright, hard-working, and determined. She poured herself into her studies, refusing to let the years of suffering hold her back. She asked questions, stayed late to read, and helped others when she could. Her teachers took notice, praising her efforts. Slowly, the whispers turned into admiration. She was no longer just the girl who had survived. She was the girl who refused to give up. Meanwhile, Cabello lived with the weight of his guilt. Each day, he watched his daughter from a distance, unsure of how to bridge the gap he had created. He tried in small ways, bringing firewood for Mama Themba, leaving gifts at their doorstep, fixing things around their home. But he knew that no action could erase the past. One evening, he found the courage to speak to Azania. "I cannot change what I did," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "But I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the father you deserved." Azania listened, her heart torn. The pain of his betrayal was still there, but so was the love she had once felt for him. She did not answer right away. Healing would take time, but she was willing to let him try. Years passed, and Azania grew into a strong, confident woman. She completed her education, excelling in her studies. With every step forward, she proved that no amount of cruelty could break her spirit. She became an inspiration to other young girls in the village, showing them that no matter how dark life seemed, there was always hope. As for Buell, her fate was one of loneliness. Cast out from the village, she wandered from place to place, searching for someone to take her in. But no one wanted a woman whose heart had been so cruel. She had spent years trying to destroy Azania, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Azania stood outside Mama Themba's home, watching the sky turn golden. She no longer carried the weight of her past like a burden. She was free, she was loved, and she was ready for whatever the future held.